Alright, today we'll review the digestive system briefly. We have this main plaque that we utilize that shows the whole thing, not in the biggest detail. It's pretty good though. We start with the oral cavity, where we have the teeth as an accessory structure. We also have the tongue that is an accessory structure to the digestive system. We get the food as well as the liquid through the mouth, obviously, and then it goes down through first the pharynx, which is the part behind the oral cavity that is shared by both air and food. And then once we go into the windpipe and anteriorly, we have posteriorly the esophagus that starts, and it carries the food via peristalsis all the way through, piercing through the diaphragm, through the esophageal hiatus, into the stomach. This portion here, the stomach, the first portion is called the cardiac area, and this sphincter that lets the food into the stomach is called the cardiac sphincter. When you look at the stomach, it's a J-shaped organ. Besides the cardia, we have the fundus, that is a piece that is above the cardiac sphincter. Then the main portion is the body, and we end up in the pyloric area with the pyloric sphincter controlling the food, or at that point the chyme, going into the duodenum, which is the first portion of the small intestine. What we have here coming in is the pancreas. But let's back up a little bit into the stomach further, because we can open the stomach, and what we can see here are these longitudinal folds, and those are rugae. The stomach also has an extra muscular layer, so it has a longitudinal, a transverse as well, or circular, as well as an oblique muscular layer. We will do the pancreas on its own model, but for completion's sake, this back here is the spleen. Then when we move from the duodenum into the second part of the small intestine, we get into the jejunum, and then lastly, what we can make up here, we end up in the ileum. And here we have a valve that goes from the ileum, which is the last part of the small intestine, into the first portion of the large intestine, which is actually the cecum. And the valve is called the Ileocecal Valve that we will have here, or sphincter. This piece here resembles the vermiform appendix, it's a lymphatic structure. So in the large intestine we have the cecum again here, then we have the ascending colon, transverse colon, the descending colon, and then the sigmoid colon, making sort of an S shape. The sigmoid colon ends in the rectum, that will end in the anal canal, and the demarcation at the end point of the anal canal is the anus that is made by the external sphincter. The large intestine has, what we can see here, has hausstrass, little houses on them, and the hausstrass are created by that white strip here, and that's actually a strip of muscle tissue, external muscle tissue, and that's called the tinea coli. Another organ we have on this plate is the liver. Large gland, as well as actually the gallbladder we can see here. The gallbladder is green. The liver has we have a right lobe and we have a left lobe, and then we have a quadrate lobe right here, and we have a caudate lobe underneath. So right lobe, left lobe, quadrate lobe, caudate lobe. The gallbladder is where the quadrate lobe is. You mean they have to pay attention themselves? Alright, this is a model of the pancreas, but we have a whole bunch of other structures here too that we can point out to. This here is actually the duodenum, or the duodenum, 12-finger part of the small intestine. It's very short. What we can see here are these folds that are made in a circular fashion. Those are plica circularis, so we can see them here. When we look at the pancreas, it's sort of an odd texture looking thing that has two pancreatic ducts in them. And we have a head of a pancreas that is encircled by the duodenum. We have a main body portion, and then we have a tail, and the tail's touching the spleen, although it does not have a connection with the spleen. In the back we have a left and we have a right kidney, as well as two adrenal glands, and then we can see here the gallbladder, and this piece is part of the quadrate lobe of the liver. When we look at the gallbladder, well, functionally, the pancreas has endocrine and exocrine function, and endocrine-wise, it makes insulin and glucagon. And exocrine-wise, it makes pancreatic juice. It's a lot of water. It's a lot of sodium bicarbonate to take away the acidity of the stomach content for the chyme. And it also, of course, has a lot of digestive enzymes such as lipase, carbohydrates, nuclease, proteolytic enzymes, etc. Looking at the gallbladder, we have from the liver a right and a left hepatic duct forming a common hepatic duct, and then we have a cystic duct coming from the gallbladder that stores and concentrates bile. And at that point, when they come together, we call it a common bile duct. And the common bile duct pierces through the pancreas and comes out of here at the greater duodenal ampulla, actually, or also known as the ampulla of Vater, V-A-T-E-R, piercing through, going through the sphincter of Oddi, which is the sphincter that will allow pancreatic juice going, or bile going in or not into the duodenum. Okay, let's look at the teeth for a moment. This plaque here, we have, when we look at the lower jaw and the upper jaw, we can split each in half, and then we have essentially 4 sets of teeth. 2 incisors for biting, 1 canine for tearing, and we have 2 premolars and 3 molars, although the last one is the wisdom tooth, and those are for grinding in the back. When we look at a tooth itself, we have a crown, we have a neck, and then we have roots of the tooth. From the outside to the inside, the top layer is enamel. That's the hardest substance in our body. Underneath that we have dentin. Actually, that's this indication here. And dentin is more of a porous bone sort of appearance. And then internally we have a pulp cavity. And a pulp cavity has an artery, a vein, as well as a nerve in it. We have an apical foramen at the bottom of the root that brings the pulp, that brings the vein, the artery, vein, and the nerve into the pulp cavity. Then we have a structure here that you cannot really see that well, but it's a little bit firmer or a little bit darker colored, and that's called cementum. And then this right here is the periodontal ligament, or at least it's indicated as such, that will anchor the cementum, therefore the tooth, into the alveolar bone of the mandible and the maxilla. And what that makes, it makes a gomphosis, which is a pec joint creation. Very strong, as we know. The teeth usually don't fall out when we just bite down. That's it.